Very good. So we are living in a society in which we are having more longevity. So the name of the game is that we not only want to have good longevity, but we want to have good quality of life. What good is it to live long time if you are not able to enjoy life? And the reality is that what we are putting in our system does have an effect. For example, in this very interesting published paper, they were documenting what's happening at the level of your brain function when you eat a high-fat meal. Now, the way that fat is digested is the following way. When you eat fat, the fat goes into your bloodstream after passing through your intestine. And if you're eating too much fat, your blood circulation is going to be looking like Kuala Lumpur. Anybody have been to Malaysia? Have you seen that traffic? You know, it's cars that are not moving. That's exactly what happens at the level of your brain. When you eat too much fat, the amount of oxygen that is reaching your brain actually decreases. Now, for some people, is high-fat breakfast, high-fat lunch, and high-fat supper. No wonder why the person feels chronically tired. See, if you don't have enough oxygen at the level of your brain, even your thinking is affected. So, what we're going to talk about today is we need to understand that we need to have a comprehensive overall plan if we want to have a healthy longevity. And the thing is that many times aging equals disease, but it doesn't necessarily need to be like that. As the person starts gaining weight, then the blood pressure starts coming up, then the fasting glucose starts going up, then even sexual health starts going down the drain, secondary that things cannot work properly, and the quality of life starts to decrease. But you know, if you see the statistics, back in the 1900s, people used to live about 2 years after retirement. Now, many people in today's age are living up to their 80s. And usually, somebody between 65 to 74 years old, about 75% of them report good health, while 67% of the people 75 and older report good health. So what we need to develop some strategies so that aging can take place in a healthy way. So what do you want to do? Well, you want to take into consideration your intellectual, emotional, physical, social, spiritual aspect of things. So let's go through each of those different aspects of the human person. First of all, your intellectual health. So here, you need to take care of that intellect because this is going to affect things such as your judgment, your creativity, your common sense, and as you live life, experience problems and challenges, then you're able to make better choices. Now, it's never too late to start stimulating your mind. In America, there is this very famous painter by the name of Grandma Moses. And this lady started painting when she was 74 years of age. And she realized that that's actually the talent that she had, and started developing it at the age of 74. And by the time she reached her 90s, she was one of the most famous painters in America back then. So it's never too late to pursue that passion and dreams that you may have. So one of the challenges that people have as they go into retirement, they say, okay, I've been working hard, now I'm gonna put my brain on neutral because now I'm retired. Don't do that, you know. Your brain is like a muscle, and you need to continue to challenge your brain if you want your brain to function in an optimum way. If you stop challenging your brain will literally start shrinking. As I tell my patients, one of the worst things you can ever do for your brain is retirement. You know? And if you're gonna retire, you need to continue to find ways of challenging your brain. And the research is very clear. Both extremes are harmful. Not doing anything with your brain is very harmful to your brain. But too much stress is not good for your brain. So you need to find that optimum point in which you are busy enough, but at the same time, you're not overwhelmed. As if you overwhelm, that stress can have very negative effects. And also, you need to have control of your thinking. Some people imagine monsters, and monsters come. Like Mark Twain says, I have been through some terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened. Many of the fears and things that make us lose our sleep, many of those things don't even exist. Okay? It's not worth it. In fact, in our mental health program, what we tell our patients is that you need to find a way to try to find truth and focus on truth. Usually, things that are not truth is what actually stresses out. So, if it's not true, don't bother. Don't stress out of imaginary things. And we know very well that all that chronic type of stress, as we were talking about it yesterday, increases something by the name of chronic inflammation, remember? And chronic inflammation is the root cause of most of the problems. And even stress has been linked to an increased risk of cancer due to the fact that an immune system under stress cannot work properly. Every day, you and I generate cancer cells. And our immune system is in charge of finding all those cancer cells and destroying them. But when you are under severe type of stress, your immune system is not working properly. And it can be dangerous because those cancer cells can start reproducing and cause havoc later on. Also, stress has been linked to increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. And we know this because the frontal lobes of your brain cannot work properly when there is too much stress. Frontal lobes of the brain is one of the first places in your brain that will start getting impaired when the process of dementia starts. That's why it's one of the best areas to be taken care of making sure our frontal lobes are nice and optimum. Now, about emotional health, this one has to do not only with our ability to keep our feelings under control, but also our ability to love others and receive love. You know, there's people that have a hard time receiving love. You need to find that balance. And the thing is that at the end of the day, the most important things that we have around us are our loved ones, isn't it? That is the most important thing that we have. You know, it's funny when somebody gets, taken, hijacked, and taken there for some weeks or months somewhere far away from everybody else. If you come out of that situation and back home and you ask them, you know, what did you miss the most? They're not going to tell you, oh, I miss my car, or I miss the jacuzzi that I have there. What are they going to be missing? Their loved ones, isn't it? In fact, in prison, they know this very well. You want to have the most severe type of punishment for a prisoner, what do you do with them? You put them in social isolation. That's the worst punishment that you can give someone. So, emotional wounds many times are significant sources of disability. In fact, this has been documented as the adverse childhood events. Traumatic things that happen throughout our life that if we don't solve those issues, many times those things start to drag us down. In fact, some people that have many of these adverse childhood events, small things that for some people may not be a big deal, for them, due to that past trauma that they experience, it happens to cause major turmoil when they face this type of situations. But we know that we need to find healthy emotions. We need to culture those emotions. Things such as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These are like a garden. Do the things in the garden just grow like that by themselves? No, isn't it? It requires focus, it requires energy, it requires cultivation, and so forth. Then the beautiful flowers or vegetables or whatever you're planting will come up. In the same way, these good characteristics that we humans can develop are like a garden. We need to make an effort so that they can grow these fruits, and this makes us better persons. We're able to interact with other people and so forth. And the issue is that when stress is on board, as stress becomes chronic, starts affecting important aspects of our life, such as rest, sleep. And when you don't sleep, then you're more stressed in the day. And when you're more stressed in the day, then you don't sleep again. And you start getting into this vicious cycle that starts affecting our anxiety levels, our depression, and so forth. So we need to put a break into these wrong type of patterns in order to start thriving back again. And it's interesting, even stress has been linked to your quality of your bones. And we know very well that when there is too much stress, there's going to be too much cortisol hormone, and the cortisol hormone happens to weaken the bones. To me, it's interesting that even in the Proverbs, it says that a happy heart is good like a medicine, But a broken spirit, what does it do? Causes osteoporosis. And it's very true that excess stress will literally weaken your bones. And that's why you can use tools such as music therapy. As you listen to beautiful type of music and you start checking the mood, you will see how you can change the current of your thinking and your emotions. In our depression program that I've been involved for many years, an essential part of our program is music therapy. And not only listening to music, but we even put our patients to sing. You think that's good? Yes, it's very good. When you are singing, somehow it changes your emotions inside of you. In fact, I remember when I was working in a program in which we had patients from Asia, we had this man that was a very well-to-do person. This business person owned many factories, but he was a terrible person. Everybody was afraid of him. In fact, he came to our program because he had a severe cancer problem. And in fact, even his wife was happy that he was gonna die because he was so mean with her. But you know, he came to our program and started understanding that life goes beyond just making money. Good life has to do also with caring your loved ones and being nice with others. And you know, something happened to him and it clicked inside of him. And he decided to change. And when he went and told his wife back again that he wanted to change, she didn't believe her. You know, he thought, oh, he's just manipulating me so he can be mean again to me. So he had to bring some of us there as witness. You know, he said, look, I promise and I have witness here that I'm going to change. And even though he was a very well-to-do person, in our program, we had these booklets that we use for singing therapy. And even though he was very well-to-do, he stole some of those singing books. So he put those books in his bathroom, in his limousine, in his office, and all kinds of places. So whenever he felt that he was going to start getting upset and start to shout to everybody, he will grab one of those books and start singing, you know. And in that way, he would change, you know, the current of his emotions in order to, you know, calm down and tranquilize himself. And you know what happened? A few months later, when he went back to his check on his oncologist, his cancer had gone into remission. And you know, the person started to become actually a nice person. And the wife started becoming in love with him again, and the story ended up very well, you know. As secondary to learning to deal with your emotions and learning to cultivate, you know, those good things that makes us good humans. Also, another thing that we need to do is to avoid pessimism. By some reason, there are some people that gravitate towards negativity. Automatically, they go like that. As we like to explain it in our depression program, we tell our patients, look, think in your head that your thoughts are like a car that you can drive, okay? So you have, we tell them this is for illustration purposes, not the way the brain works, but just for illustration purposes, that let's say that your brain is like this. Half your brain is sunny, you know, there's a beautiful field of grass with plenty of flowers and sunlight and so forth. And then the other half of your brain is what is rainy and lots of mud and it's dark and gloomy and so forth. And some people habitually like to drive their thoughts into the negative side of the brain. And they have so much mud accumulated that they walk like this, you know. So we tell our patients, you need to consciously avoid negative thinking. That's not something I can do for you. That's something you need to choose. So whenever those thoughts of negativity and so forth present themselves, you have to choose not to think those thoughts. You have the ability to change the way you think. And another thing that helps us regarding our emotions is exercise. One of the best ways of starting your day is exercise. Exercise sets the stage for your whole day. And that's what I've been doing here. You know, I wake up early. There's a nice little forest here that I like to go running there. And I go there. There's all kinds of beautiful birds and animals there that you're able to see. And you start your day much better. Even if you had a rough night, by doing exercise early in the day, that's going to help break down that negative cycle of bad sleep. And also another thing that we use very much in our patient population is deep breathing exercises. And this is something that we can do throughout the day. As things start getting out of control and you start feeling, you know, the stress level is coming up, just open a window or open the door, go outside and start breathing in and out slowly. It has a fantastic effect to calm down your emotions. Now, physical health, as the saying says, the way we live determines how we die, and is the reality. You know, an excellent example of this is a lady by the name of Hulda Crooks. This lady was a very sick person. She had problems with osteoporosis. She was a wreck regarding her emotions all the time, issues with depression and anxiety. And when she was in her 50s, she says, you know what, I have enough. I need to do something about this. And she decided to start walking. And she always enjoyed the challenge of going uphill. And as time went by, as she continued with her exercise program, she noticed she could last longer and longer and longer. And she put herself as a goal to climb every mountain in America. And she actually accomplished that. And she was in her 80s, in her 90s, still going up mountains. In her 80s, she climbed Mount Fuji in Japan. In fact, there is a mountain in Southern California that is named after her, and she was able to have a nice long life. She actually died at the age of 101 in her sleep. That's the way you should be dying, you know. You go to sleep and you don't wake up, you know. That's the way that is like the ideal type of death, isn't it? Rather than suffering for years and years and years and years and years. So she is an example of how, even though in your past you may not have done, you know, what you should be doing, it's never too late to start that positive changes regarding the physical realm. And there is a plenty of research evidence. You can Google this if you want to. The Adventist Health Study, they have been following these people for more, 100,000 people since the 1950s, and showing what type of behaviors give you that longevity edge. Among the findings of the longest living people, some of the characteristics of these groups are they don't smoke, their family, they put them first, they're active not just in the mornings but throughout the whole day. They have a nice social network that they like to nurture. Their food happens to be a plant-based diet, rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and beans. They take a whole day of rest so that they can, have more energy and be able to perform better. And faith is part of their daily living. And that sanctuary of time, that time that they take off, actually has been documented that helps them deal with stress. There's many people that have days off, but they don't take the day off, isn't it? That all the stress and everything continues, and it's not good for you. When you have days off, you should have days off. And the people living this type of lifestyle, as you can see, their life expectancy is above the average. Secondary, that as you put those good behaviors in practice, there's going to be some good fruits as a result of that. And the killers of our society, such as cancer and heart disease, are devastating, are cutting lives short, and they are decreasing the quality of life of many people. So what we can do, we can deal with the root causes of those diseases and decrease the likelihood that they present. Tomorrow we'll be going into more detail about how to stop this. But we know that one of the things that will age you the most is something by the name of oxidative stress. So as its name says so, oxidative stress causes your cells to age faster than what they should. And if your cells age, that means your organs are aging. That means you are aging much more. And this is something very well documented. Diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, the toxins that are being generated through the normal functioning of your nerve cells, they accumulate. And then you add oxidative stress to this, it means those brain cells starts to damage, they're unable to repair, and you end up losing a lot of those brain cells, and that's not good. Alzheimer's disease has been described by pathologists as a tree that lacks the leaves, okay? And that's what happens. As many more cells start to die, you end up creating an unbalance at the level of your brain, and you get yourself in really big trouble. So one of the best things you can do to prevent that oxidative damage is, number one, stop foods that are oxidative. We talked about that a little bit yesterday under inflammation. All those animal products actually happen to damage your cells. They cause oxidation. But when you're eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables, the natural antioxidants that are found on those fruits and vegetables have the ability to stop that oxidative stress. And the same story with diseases such as Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease, a tremendously devastating disease. You have in your brain these cells that are in charge of creating motion, and then you have these cells in charge of stopping motion. And when there is an unbalance, that's when Parkinson's disease develops, in which the person is unable to stop the motion of their limbs. And this has been very well documented that the root cause of this problem is oxidative stress and introduction of toxins. And this is one of the advantages that you get by switching to a full plant-based diet. You're automatically cutting down a lot of those oxidative causing food, and you are increasing the amount of those antioxidants that are able to buffer some of that damage. So toxins are something that we need to leave in our world today. Things like DDT or its close cousin DDD are something that creates a lot of those oxygen-free radicals that damage our cells. So as we increase those plant-rich foods, we will be able to increase the load of antioxidants and helping us buffer some of that damage. So make sure that you're eating plenty of vitamin A, C, and flavonoids, not in the form of pills, but from your food. So how do you get those foods? As I tell my patients, you have to learn to eat your rainbow. If you notice, there's fruits and vegetables that are black, there's some that are purple, some that are blue, some that are red, some that are orange, some that are yellow, some that are white. Each shade of color has different sets of phytochemicals, which are chemicals that are found on plants. There's more than 3,000 of them in nature. And as you have that nice variety of shades, you bring about the whole spectrum of antioxidants in order to have the optimum level so that you can buffer some of this damage that are happening in your body. So make sure that you not only eat cooked food, but also plenty of raw food. Both of them have good characteristics. For example, the tomatoes are rich in the phytochemical by the name of lycopene. And when you cook the tomatoes, you actually break down the cells, releasing more of that lycopene, and it's more likely that your body will absorb it. So it's not only just raw or just cook, but the combination of both of them is what's going to give you the optimum nutrition. And this is also another problem that we see quite often in the medical practice, and is macular degeneration, in which your receptors of your eye start to damage. And one of the main reasons for macular degeneration happens to be a diet high in animal products. All those high level of cholesterols start to damage the arteries that are feeding those receptors of your eye. And those tiny little arteries, as they get clogged in by cholesterol, you start losing the ability to see, your peripheral vision and so forth, and you can get yourself in really big trouble. Don't wait until you have this condition to do something about it. Start cutting down those cholesterol rich foods, which happen to be products from animals. And that's why we know very well that meat has been linked to all kinds of diseases, as we were talking about, due to the fact that it doesn't have those antioxidants and is a very oxidative type of food. And the more that you eat meat, the higher your risk for a cardiovascular problem. And this is something linear. And according to the Adventist health study, there's a similar pattern regarding fish consumption and cardiovascular risk. And anything that is above 150, or in your numbers, anything that is above 6 in your cholesterols is not very good. It's linear. The more the cholesterol, the more the probability of heart disease. And we know very well from this Adventist health study, when you divide the different types of diets, notice how if you switch from a meat diet to an ovo-lacto vegetarian, you're decreasing the risk of heart disease. And if you switch from an ovo-lacto vegetarian to a full vegetarian, you decrease dramatically the risk of heart disease and stroke. So this is something that we can actively choose. And the same story regarding different types of cancers. The more you eat meat, the higher your risk of cancer. So strokes, one of the most devastating issues as part of the brain dies. Eating meat more than 4 times a week tremendously increase of all types of strokes. And the same story happens when you are eating fats and trans fats. Be careful with those trans fats, usually used when you are frying things or when you want to have products that last longer with shelf life. If in the ingredient you read partially hydrogenated fat, avoid that. It's not a good fat for you. If you can see, eating that trans fat increases your risk for diabetes. While if you compare to the fats that are naturally found on plant foods, notice that it doesn't have a negative effect regarding your risk of diabetes. And this is something that a colleague of mine was documenting, how the plaque, this is the artery of the heart, and then suddenly it clocks in. All this is plaque, and that's why the diameter becomes so small. This is the same patient before and after, 32 months after switching his diet to a plant-based diet. So, grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables should be our nutrition. Beware also the combination in this paper of fast food and television was not a good combination. Okay? Just sitting down and eating junk food is not the best. And you can see here, the more fast food you eat and the more television you watch, the more your risk for diabetes. And be careful also with excess sodium. It has been documented that too much sodium can increase the risk of stroke. And tobacco, very well known, isn't it? Causing all kinds of increased risk for disease due to the fact, as we were talking about yesterday, of being so inflammatory. And that chronic inflammation that it triggers increases all kinds of problems. And be careful also with alcohol. We talked about this yesterday, isn't it? How alcohol is so inflammatory. increasing from heart disease to osteoporosis to dementia. In fact, the biggest study done in France trying to find what factors was increasing the risk of dementia, alcohol was the number one in the list that increased the risk for their dementia. And we know very well that as fat accumulates is one of the main triggers for type 2 diabetes. This is a CT scan in which we're able to see inside the abdomen. Notice how all this white that is there, that is fat accumulated. The more the fat accumulated inside our belly, the higher the risk for diabetes. So this is one of the goals that we should have, to decrease this abdominal fat. And the more weight the person has, the more the risk for arthritis through many mechanisms. Number one, through the chronic inflammation that it may cause. And number two, due to the fact that you're putting more load on those articulations, higher risk of deformation. So just losing 10% of your weight does wonderful things regarding pain in your joints, and you're able to regain a lot of your mobility and so forth. So as Benjamin Franklin says, to lengthen thy life, lessen thy meals. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. If you don't find time to exercise, you're going to have to find time to be sick. And that is the reality. So let me just jump into this one. So we know that physical activity, the more active you are, the less likely to end up with diabetes. And the worrisome part about diabetes is that we have been able to find out that in your brain, every single type of dementia, you have insulin resistance at the level of the brain. So if you want to decrease your risk for dementia, you need to make sure you do something regarding your metabolic health as you decrease that. And we know also very well that exercise can decrease the risk of hip fracture. And you're very well aware this is something very traumatic, especially people in their 70s, 80s. A hip fracture is a huge problem. Also, another aspect we shouldn't forget is our social health. We need to make sure that we are nurturing our social networks because it makes us feel happier. It helps us enjoy life when we do it together with somebody else. Also, we're able to be more hopeful for the future, and we're able to decrease anxiety and depression when we are nurturing our social health. And one of the challenges that we have is that today's society is very compartmentalized, very separated from each other. In the old days, people would live, first, second, third generation. They would all live together, in the same farm and so forth. So you had this nice social interaction. Not today. As people separate from each other, in the old days at least used to meet once in a week to, for some sort of church service or social club or something. All those things are being broken down in our society, and that's causing all kinds of trouble. And finally, your spiritual health. This is something that has been published very well in the scientific literature, how people that have that spiritual health have longer life expectancy, has better life satisfaction, they deal better when they have to face things like illness, have fewer hospitalizations, they suffer less anxiety, and their immune system works much better. So make sure that you nurture this part of your life. And make sure that you have a bright planning, and start planning from now. Write down your objectives. As you get older, what do you want to see? What are your dreams? What are your goals? And then make a chart and write down your physical, intellectual, emotional, social, spiritual, and create a strategy. How are you going to be meeting these needs? Because if you have a plan, you're able to fulfill these issues much better. So as you can see, life begins at 60. You may not be able to add years to your life, but you can surely add life to your years. May God bless you. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and we'll be waiting for you tomorrow. Thank you very much.